Okay, here we go with the hashtag Ag Twitter lightning round. I'm with Lana Shaw from the southeastern Saskatchewan research farm, and we've been having an amazing conversation about soil health and intercropping and all the way that Lana sees the universe and all kinds of good stuff. But now I really want to get to producers' questions directly off Twitter, and Lana is a big Twitter person herself, and she loves the interaction that she gets there. So we want to answer these questions. Starting with Paige Stewart. Hey, Paige, how's it going? What, if any, were the unforeseen costs of switching to intercropping?
I think it's actually grain storage that people don't think of, maybe. Like, yeah, they know they have to have a separation equipment. But when you're, you have to have storage for your mixed grain and then somewhere to put the things that you're separating out, and then you're going to have some bit of where your dockage or whatever, you're going to have to put your dockage somewhere. And if you're intercropping generally results in people growing more total crops. So therefore you're going to need to keep them all in separate space. I think if I was pressed, that would be what I would say is storage.
Love it. That probably speaks to Joel Hagee's question. Costs of separating and marketability of the crops. Pea/oats are a common one, but many mills won't buy the oats if there's too many splits in them.
Yes. So that's something that you need to give some thought before you even plant the crop. There's good odds that there's going to be some bits of one crop in your other crop. Find out who you can sell that to before you even put it in the ground. So this isn't something people should undertake and just decide willy-nilly in April that they're going to do this. So there's some grain companies that don't mind some. Grain Millers was one that had very little tolerance for split peas in their oats, whereas Patterson didn't mind as much. So talk to your grain buyers and see what issues they're going to have maybe before you put the stuff in the ground, and figure out, can you actually separate the stuff, including broken bits of crop, before you put it in the ground, because it's a lot better to figure it out before you seed it than after you've harvested it, whether or not you can adequately separate it.
Great advice. Great advice. Ron Cron asks, what is the goal of cover cropping, specifically on the nutrient side? I understand more organic matter and water infiltration. Pardon me. If it is to have the soil to be more healthy, so it makes more nutrients available so we can apply less fertilizer, are we still not just mining the soil?
Okay. If we're talking nitrogen, no, then we're not mining soil. We can produce nitrogen through nitrogen fixation, and cover crops are capable of doing that. Some of them are. If we're talking phosphorus, that is an interesting controversy that I don't want to get into too much. But yes, there's some of the cover crops maybe making that nutrient more available, but there's nothing saying that you can't keep adding phosphorus with your grain crops. We're exporting grain, exporting phosphorus. I don't think it's a bad idea to find a phosphorus source to replace that. And there's all kinds of different phosphorus sources, including some that are derived from effluent. So pick your phosphorus source and go carry on.
Good point. Good point. Devin Walker asks, how to intercrop without soil pathogen and disease buildup? Clubroot, Phanomyces, Fusarium. Continuous croppers are stretching rotations further all the time. Intercropping appears to stack problems, not space them out. Darn it. Seems counterintuitive.
This is a question I get almost every time I do an intercropping talk. And fortunately, I've been, as an agronomist of 20 years, I'm very well aware of soil pathology issues, and literally doing trials on Phanomyces, multiple research trials on Phanomyces right now with Sham Chatterton. So not all pulses are hosts of Phanomyces. So peas and lentils are, a lot of the other pulses are not. So if you can space out those pulses in your rotation while still intercropping, then you don't have to have peas every other year. That's not anything I recommend to people, even if they're trying to convince me it's a wonderful idea, obviously they're going to do what they want to do. But it's just a more complex way of thinking about rotations. Instead of saying, oh, we can only have one pulse every 4 years. Well, maybe you only have peas every 4 years or every 6 years. But that doesn't mean that's the only pulse that you can have in that 4 or 6 year time period. So you could have chickpeas, you could have fava beans, you could have some other pulses. And the same goes for oil seeds. There's nothing saying you can only have one kind of an oil seed in a 4 or 6 year rotation. You could have a flax and canola in the same rotation. You just have to be really careful about volunteers and not having, obviously, a flax and canola intercrop, involuntary intercrop is problematic for separation reasons. So it's manageable is kind of what I would say on that.
Oof, I feel like I need a whiskey or something here. Dale Steele says, where does the researcher do their field work? I mean, obviously we've covered that, southeastern Saskatchewan, but I mean, the point is, then ask them what they think is the minimum in-season rainfall required for success. Too often, Lana, the headlines lack regional detail and context, darn it. Adopting, sorry for like imposing my tone onto these questions I'm trying to capture. Too often the headlines lack regional detail and context. Adopting ag practices from Kentucky may produce different results in Palliser Triangle. We got to put the sticker on regenerative ag here. Anyways, take it away.
So I agree. There's some techniques like the relay cropping that is really cool and awesome in some other places. I don't think it has a fit here. I am literally doing trials in southeast Saskatchewan, and that's the only place I have a research farm, so it's the only place I do my research. But I am involved in multi-site trials where we have locations in the Palliser Triangle. We have there's trials and intercropping trials being done in Swift Current. Is it done everywhere in the Palliser Triangle? No, but there are locations it is being evaluated in quite dry sites or in typically dry sites. Some of the locations that would be doing intercropping trials the last few years were at least dry in those years. Like last year, we were actually quite dry. So we've had quite wet seasons and quite dry seasons where intercropping is being evaluated. If as far as cover crops, like black soil zone and dark gray soil zone are probably much more feasible and much easier to pull that off than in brown soil zone. Dark brown is maybe more possible, but still you're still much more moisture limited. So, but as far as intercrops like Axtons and Cody Straza, there's people in some very dry areas that have been intercropping for quite a few years successfully that think that it's an advantage. That having, just because you've got more than one species of crop doesn't mean that the moisture limitation is a really big problem. They may be seeing advantages still, even under very moisture limited conditions. I think they've tended to do is just drop the seeding rates a little bit. So we're not overseeding so much. So dropping the seeding rates and lowering the densities of both the crops so that it's just manageable.
Well, I'm glad we're not discriminating against people in the brown zones, because that wouldn't be right. Everybody can have a little bit of taste
about them.
We love them too. Jared Gus says, define sustainable. Both environmental and economic. I'm still looking for the same answer of any two people. And I chimed in, hey, sustainable maintains and regenerative improves. I hate those words. As a marketer, as a human being. It's like, oh, get me out of this conversation. But if we don't use words, how do we impart our ideas and do the same things?
Yeah. So those words have quite diverse meanings depending on who is using them. But I think you were right about sort of the emphasis behind a sustainable is to try to make sure that your system isn't deteriorating. But some of the ideas originally behind sustainable agriculture was social sustainability also, and what's happening to your rural communities, what's happening to the environment. Like, yes, things need to be economically sustainable, but we farm in an ecosystem of ideas and programs and all of that. I don't think just being focused on 1 year over another profits as the driver for your sustainability of your farm should be the be all end all. I don't think that is sustainability. Yes, economics has to be part of what ensures the long-term continuity of agriculture. If anything has driven me in the last 20 years, it is a vision for the long-term continuity of a healthy agriculture in the province. And all of my great-grandparents homesteaded in Saskatchewan, and my family still farms at Darcy and has been on the same land for over 100 years. That I want agriculture to be successful for another 100 and 200 years, and for farmers to be, happy to be out farming in 100 years from now. So, and to have happy, good communities and families that are happy to be there. That is sort of a larger context of sustainability that I want to see.
Jason McNamee from Lucent Biosciences asks, how do you define soil health? You should listen to his episode, by the way.
I don't know
it would be very interesting.
I should. I don't know if I can or should. But maybe it's more useful to define unhealthy and relative to healthy. And I think unhealthy soil is one that's actively killing plants and or that's disappearing down the creek. Or that is becoming unable to absorb water effectively. Like I can say I have seen unhealthy soils. I have planted things into unhealthy soils that I am, kind of grieving the state of them. And I think all of those can be improved over time. So it is all relative. Infiltration rate and farmers being able to do an infiltration rate test on their own is one of the most impactful measures of whether or not your soil is functional. So I like the word functional and improving functionality more so than healthy versus not healthy. So if your water infiltration rate is improved, that's a really good indicator that your soil is more functional. There's a whole bunch of soil biology and chemistry and everything that goes into improving the infiltration rate of your soil. But it's a really easy thing to do yourself. Pound a pipe into the ground and pour water in it, and then do it again a couple of years later. And it's a legitimate soil physics technique that they'll do. So that's my approach on soil health. As a plant nerd, if soils are functional, then they grow fantastic plants. And that's just an indicator of that you have a functional soil.
Jay Schultz, Wheatlander Jay, you probably know him on Twitter. What has been your worst experience growing intercrops, Lana?
I've had lots of experience, and some of it bad, and I always think that me learning something that didn't work is terrifically useful, so therefore it's kind of good. But some of the things where I would say this is really not very good was, like, I had a pea canola trial where we had bad Aphanomyces, and so the peas were having a fail. They were barely growing in the understory of the canola. The canola was growing okay, but because we seeded it at a relatively low rate and didn't fertilize it, it was a very sad canola crop with a very sad pea crop growing underneath it. And the peas were ripe a month before the canola. That was not a good scenario. And now, what I didn't realize was that there had been peas on that field 2 years previous, and I didn't know that there was an Aphanomyces problem on that field. So if I had known that, I wouldn't have put that trial there. So that one kind of kicked me in the butt a bit, but we learned things, and we definitely learned that intercropping is no magic solution to Aphanomyces. The peas growing on their own were also terrible. So the pea monocrop was not good, but the canola monocrop was just fine. It had, if it was seeded at normal rates and fertilizers, then it was just fine. So, the intercrop was really not a win in that situation, but we learned things.
Interesting. Darren Peters, this just came in. Have you ever done a total nutrient analysis of your soil and subsoil below? I did. And I believe we have loads of nutrients in our soil and massive amounts in subsoil that would be available once plants and microbiology access / turn it into topsoil.
I am not a soil scientist. I understand there's very complicated nuances on forms of phosphate and how this is particularly a phosphate and maybe a potash question, because that's the one where they're saying, well, you don't need to fertilize for phosphate because total phosphate is abundant in agricultural soils. And I fertilize most of ours with phosphate, or at least they're planted on soils that are regularly fertilized with phosphate. So I don't know. I'd need to defer to soil scientists on a lot of that. It's out of my wheelhouse, and I'm okay with that.
It depends. Just say it depends.
It depends. I'm a scientist, and it's not my specialization.
Shannon Selinsky.
I defer.
Yeah. We'll have another episode with a soil scientist. Shannon Selinsky asks, can you build a Lego soil profile?
I have Lego at home still. My teenagers have outgrown Lego recently, a couple years ago. In theory, yes. But I need Lego earthworms. I'm not sure how I'd manage that.
But there's a lot of other really
great. Exactly
great.
what the question meant.
Yeah, it's just a funny one. Don't worry about it. Hey, there's a lot of other nuances going on in the thread here, conversations. You should jump in there if you like. It seems like a lot of people are.
I'll jump in. I don't think it
has
has to be a mystery that it was. I don't think it has to be a mystery that it was me you're interviewing. So I might jump in there this afternoon, or this evening.
I feel like possibly. if I keep it anonymous, people are more apt to throw things out there. I feel like if they know who I'm. Not that it's a huge deal in life. I mean, the implications are relatively small on the impact of humanity. But I feel like if, as a matter of importance, but I feel like if I let them know who the guest is, then it sort of colors the whole thing. So it's like just a random, kind of like somebody's coming on to talk about this. The final question was that I was going to throw out there was, are you double vaccinated? But you know what? I don't even want you to answer, and it's nobody's business. And that's not a conversation we're going to have on Growing the Future podcast at this point. But God bless Trusted Sarah from Trusted Marketing asked it. And if you want to know the Lana's answer, you can go on my Twitter and see it. But we're not going there on the show. But Lana, incredible. We finally connected. We got going on the conversation. I feel like it's just starting, and I don't know, it's endless fodder for conversation. But I really appreciate what you're doing. And, I guess I think about research a lot as somebody who's bringing products to the market, and this particular space too of, things that make the soil better, things that make our business better, things that make our health and our lives better. That's becoming more and more a theme of my life. And I love the theme of your life, diversity, that you talked about. Thanks for coming on the show, Lana. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to reach you?
Twitter.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way. Yeah. Because probably most of your audience is
That's
on
how we
Twitter
did it.
anyway. So
yeah, they are.
Yeah. So, and we have a website, southeastresearchfarm.org, and but the best way to get a hold of me is either to text me from the number that is on the website, or just message me on Twitter.
I feel like we have unfinished business. I feel like we need to talk again soon. So, all the best. You guys done harvest yet?
No, we've got flax and soybeans and a couple intercrop trial left, and chickpeas and things like that. So we're on the home stretch, over 70% done.
Great. Well, good luck with the rest of that. Have a safe finish to the harvest, and God bless researchers and all they're doing. I think and I love this idea of viral ideas, and I think it's coming. I think we're getting better. I think we're good, but we're getting better, and I appreciate the work that you do. So keep up the good work.
Thanks. Well, Maya Angelou said something about when we know better, we do better, and agriculture has pretty much always done that. There's never been a time where we didn't figure out something better and then do better. So I just try to keep doing that.
We're on the right path. Thanks, Lana.
Yeah. Thanks.